What is up, everyone? Hope you're doing fantastically well today. It is Saturday, August 6th, 7th, and this is Raphael Garcia here for episode number 93 of the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast. So it's been a little while, folks, and I apologize for being gone. I've been a bit under the weather and still fighting through a bit of that, but you know, it is what it is. And I was thinking about the future of this show, which I'll probably talk about at the end of this episode, because there's quite a bit to say with things that are going on in the world of professional wrestling, especially with what happened last night with multiple people being released from the WWE. So we're going to definitely be talking about that. Talking about the success that we're seeing in AEW and just some of the lows that are going on in the WWE. But before we do that, as always, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone for their support of this show, for listening to this episode and listening to any episode that you may have heard in the past. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe wherever you may find us. As you always know, we are on Anchor, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, and Spotify. You can check us out on Instagram at MMA Ratings Net, which is where a lot of our content goes. And you can also hit us up on Instagram and Twitter at MMA Ratings Net in both spaces. Myself, you can hit me up at rgarcia_sports, and I will always appreciate your support. Please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and share it wherever you can. So let's go ahead and start with these cuts that the WWE pushed through last night. And it was around 9:30ish that I first saw the news come out. I think I finished content around 9:30 or so because SmackDown was still on. But 13 names were released from NXT yesterday. Bronson Reed, Tyler Russ, Leon Ruff, Mercedes Martinez, Bobby Fish, Ari Sterling, Kona Reeves, Stephon Smith, Zachariah Smith, Jake Atlas, Asher Hill, Giant Sangier, and Desmond Troy. Now, this really says a lot and has a lot of people up in arms, as it rightfully should. Because if you look at who they cut, it almost seems like no one's safe, clearly. Bronson Reed won the NXT North American title 3 months ago. Leon Ruff is a former champion. Tyler Russ is in Diamond Mine. Diamond Mine is the big stable that they debuted a few months back, and it's pretty much the main, well, Hit Row is the main stable, but Diamond Mine is a new group on the block, for lack of a better term, and they just cut Tyler Russ like it was nothing. Bobby Fish was feuding with that group. Him and Roderick Strong had a good match on Wednesday of this week. He's gone. And I know Fish had a lot of issues with injuries that kept putting him on the shelf, but just to see him get cut inexplicably like that, being a part of Undisputed Era, he's just gone, it just blew my mind. Mercedes Martinez, she was having she didn't get the run that a lot of people hoped, and she's a legend in the game. Yeah, she was hurt. She had an injury up against Xia Li from a couple of weeks ago, but she could have been a pillar piece of the NXT women's division and even been someone who is around as a coach or agent in the future, but she's gone. There's so much to really unpack from this that it's just like, it's very weird. And I saw some people joking about Vince McMahon finally visiting NXT, which he did, I think, 2 weeks ago, seeing the product, not being happy with the product. I was like, oh, well, we're gonna wipe all this out. But you can't help not to feel that way. And if you look at the way NXT was explicably treated through the squashing of Karrion Kross on the main roster, you can't help but say to yourself, man, this group is not seen in the same way that the fans see it. And there's a lot of different conversations going on about that online right now, about whether or not the NXT experiment has failed. And man, right now, I am of the mark that it has failed, and I'm going to go into why about that. And if you want more, kind of some more thoughts about this, go check out Brandon Thurston's Twitter feed about where he talks about this. But the interesting thing about this is that NXT isn't it's a brand that they moved up to USA to try to counteract AEW, and we see that didn't happen because AEW continues to grow. We're going to talk about that in a second as well. But NXT hasn't really produced any big name stars that were unknown before they got there. If you look at people like Samoa Joe, everyone knew who Samoa Joe was before he got there. Finn Balor had already had name value. Nakamura, I mean, they never really did anything on the main roster, but you even have names like Adam Cole and Undisputed Era, so many others that, other than the Four Horsewomen, what stars has the NXT brand really created? You'd be hard pressed to answer that question and come up with a full list of names because there really aren't that many. I mean, Bronson Reed, for example, everyone was expecting his call up to happen, and he was doing dark matches on the main roster. But what was his ceiling? Maybe Intercontinental Champion, maybe a mid-card championship, but we know he wasn't going to be pushed into the main title picture at any point in time. We know that wasn't going to happen. Look at Mercedes Martinez was in Retribution and said, nah, I'm going to go ahead and pass on this. Got sent back down to NXT, and she was used well, but she was never slotted for that big time run that people thought she would get. And it's still so unfortunate to look at NXT and see that their one big moment came all because of that Saudi Arabia situation with the flight and so many people being stuck on a flight and not being able to make it back for SmackDown. That's the only reason why they got any type of main roster push, and we saw how that played out because they haven't really been mentioned in that same light since. And even though the fans may see NXT as the best brand that WWE has to offer, leadership does not value them the same way, and there isn't a value. At least it seems like there isn't a value in a developmental system within WWE. Ratings aren't improving. It isn't a huge contract for USA, nothing like Raw or what SmackDown has over there at Fox. Performance Center is not cheap. It really saved their butts this year because of COVID-19, and they had a facility to be able to film, and I think they'll keep it around for something along those lines. But the Performance Center is not cheap at all. Should fans be concerned about NXT? I think the answer is yes to that. I think the answer is yes. I think in 1 year from now, that brand is going to look entirely different than what we currently see. I won't be surprised if when the deal with USA runs out, if it's moved back to, it can't be moved back to WWE Network, but something has to be done because the way that it's being treated right now does not bode well for a long-term platform. It doesn't bode well as a long-term pillar to WWE and their content, the three brand content. I don't know how they would change it. I can't possibly foresee them doing anything where they're rolled into one show. I mean, they still have 205 Live that's just sitting there doing nothing. They have Main Event that's just sitting there not doing anything. This promotion is in such a weird spot because you see or you hear their financial calls where they're having bigger quarters year over year than they've had ever before. They're coming off the biggest revenue driving year in the company's history, and they're still making decisions to cut people left and right. You see a lot of people talking about a sale that they're trying to remain profitable so they can look good to potential buyers. Okay, that's one way to look at that. You see that happen in sports often, where teams, when they're about to get sold, they do a lot of purging of heavy contracts. But this is just, I mean, you wonder what the end game is. And Sean Rossap over at Fightful has been doing a lot of great reporting about this, and he did a story earlier today about how 2021, this year, is going to be different than any other year in recent memory when it comes to these cuts and releases, and that it seems like more should be expected, and that it's the level of names that would probably be the most surprising part of that, with such as Bray Wyatt being cut last Saturday unceremoniously. He was actually slated to return in August, but they just let him go. They claimed it was because of budget cuts. But where are they penny pinching? Where are they tight for money if their revenue is growing year after year? And it's not just the on-air talent. Those are the names that we see and hear about. But people behind the scenes have been getting cut as well, too, which is equally unfortunate because they're losing out on jobs and having to find another job in the middle of a pandemic, which is difficult in the production space because you can't do these live in-person events where production expertise would be needed. So there really is a cause for concern when looking at the WWE product as a whole. I would really have some thoughts about that if I was working there. Like, what is going on? I understand why morale is low within the NXT locker room and probably within the main locker room as well. I'm really curious to see what this group will look like 1 year from today. We'll see. But NXT has been my favorite group of wrestling for the last 2 to 3 years, even with AEW out there. And I'm going to talk more about AEW in a minute. But they are not going to look the same. And the days of excellent showcases each month, each takeover, every week are long gone. And it's unfortunate that everyone has to kind of go through that. I'm going to talk a little bit about main roster WWE, but it sucks. And it's really hard to find anything enjoyable within it as the things continue to happen, because it's hard to get invested in these names because in a moment's notice they could be gone. Like, I am really concerned that one day I'm gonna flip on the news and see that the New Day got cut, or Street Profits got cut, or Sasha Banks, or one of the Four Horsewomen gets cut. And what's so sad about that is that they're the reason why I'm sticking around when it comes to WWE. There's a lot of conversations going on, specifically within wrestling Twitter, about the lack of diversity and inclusion in the in the AEW roster, and I'll be talking about that in a few minutes, which is true. But I stick around WWE because of the people who look like me. The Hit Rows, the New Day, Bianca Belair, Sasha Banks, Bayley, even being Afro-Latina. So many people that look like me, that are people of color excelling in some ways. That's a reason why I stick around with WWE so much. But then you look at the alternative, and I'll be talking about AEW in a minute, where their main event picture is about as white as it gets. I mean, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Britt Baker, they're all white. Miro just became champion, and I'm not. He's European, Middle Eastern, I guess you would call it. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, it's very, very, very white. I mean, you don't even see Scorpio Sky on television anymore. You don't see any singles performers on NXT or AEW Dynamite anymore. But we'll be talking about that in a few moments. But main roster WWE, it's just not good. And it's not good in any way, shape, or form. SummerSlam is 3 weeks away, and there's almost no momentum around it. John Cena is back, but they do not put him on television for whatever reason. He was there at SmackDown last night. He wrestled a dark match, and they just don't put him on TV. Why? Who knows? But WWE may have to go back to the Thunderdome because COVID-19 outbreaks continue to rise. We see the Delta variant surging, and we see cases and hospitalizations all going up. I mean, we're back to last year numbers of hospitalizations and new cases, and that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon as people skirt and scoff at the idea of getting vaccines. And going back to the Thunderdome would kill any type of momentum they've built. And they've built very little. But whatever they have will be gone if they have to go back to the Thunderdome for SummerSlam. And even as matches are announced, it's still hard to get excited about this event because it's the same shit. Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair are going to be, great, but it's another rematch. John Cena versus Roman Reigns. Okay, cool. John Cena has some great comments this week about the aging WWE product and how the future doesn't seem as stable. And he's 100% right. I was really, I even had an inkling of a should I go to SummerSlam thought process to myself, but the answer is clearly no. Thank God I'm not. I have tickets and everything to go to All Out. Not sure if that's going to be happening now as COVID-19 continues to rampage, but yeah, SummerSlam is there. I couldn't imagine trying to be excited about that show right now. WWE is in a very bad position. They have huge contracts. They're raking in a lot of revenue, but I want to see where this company is in the next 18 months. Where are they in 18 months, and what is the perception of the value that they bring to television when these new deals are up and they have to renegotiate something? Like, that's really what I'm looking forward to in the future. But on the flip side of that, we have the lows of WWE, and AEW is continuing to thrive. AEW has had 4 straight weeks exceeding 1 million views. 1 million viewers for their Dynamite show on Wednesdays, and this past week was the most important one of those in my opinion because it wasn't a super stacked card. I mean, you had Christian Cage versus The Blade, Eva Rise and Danny Garcia versus Darby Allin, Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. You had Malachi Black versus Cody Rhodes. You had one women's match, Layla Hirsch versus the Bunny. And you got Miro versus Lee Johnson, I feel like, and maybe some other stuff on the show. But that's not a super stacked show knowing what they can give us. And they still did, I think, 1.02 million. They have a product that has excitement around it. And when you watch the shows, it's like, I need to make sure I catch the show because you never know what could happen. And that is a level of excitement that hasn't been seen in wrestling for a very long time. I've talked about it on this show as well. The energy around Dynamite is different than the energy around WWE, and it's palpable. You can feel it. People watch WWE to see what they can get upset about next. People openly talk about missing WWE in a way that makes it clear that they're not missing anything. And you don't hear that same type of talk going on with AEW. They do have their own issues, and we'll be talking about that in a second. But from a strictly, I'm a wrestling fan and I want to have fun watching some wrestling, they're providing that. And they're doing it on a weekly basis. Rampage is starting this week, I believe, and that's going to be an opportunity for... That time slot concerns me a little bit, Friday at 10 o'clock. I won't be watching too much of that show live, I can tell you that, because I'm usually out on Fridays, but I'm sure that there will be people watching enough to get them some more advertising revenue. I just won't be one of them. And of course, we have to talk, in talking about AEW, we have to talk a little bit about the rumors of CM Punk and Daniel Bryan being signed. That shows you how long it's been since I've done an episode, and those are 2 big signings. I don't think that they bring an automatic million viewers with them, but they do bring a bump with them. I can definitely say that, and that is going to be an important thing to watch because I don't think they don't need to bring, 5-star matches every single week. They don't need to bring that. I mean, you don't see that out of Christian Cage. He's not bringing 5-star matches every single week, but he's doing enough in the ring to be able to perform and give fans a reason to be excited to see him compete. Daniel Bryan and CM Punk can do that, and they can do it at a higher level. They're bigger stars than Christian Cage. And that's what I'm interested in seeing. I want to see what type of bump they bring to the promotion as a whole. They bring some validity to AEW, not as if it needed more, but they continue to bring some validity that may bring back some lapsed fans. What I will say, though, is that AEW does not need to go after every name that is released from WWE. They have done a great job of elevating the people that they have signed and the people like a Darby Allin, who, I'm gonna do some more research before I talk about that. But they've elevated Jungle Boy, Sammy Guevara, MJF, people that were never in WWE. Britt Baker as well. Well, she was there, but as an enhancement talent. So they don't need to jump on the Bronson Reeds, the Leon Ruffs, the Tyler Russ. They don't need to jump on all of them. Maybe in the future they can bring them in. That could be one thing if they bring them in the future. But they do have a very bloated roster that doesn't need every single name that's cut from the WWE. What I will say, however, though, is that the rumor of them signing Ruby Soho, I think that's a perfect fit. That came out on Thursday, I believe, and Ruby Soho, formerly known as Ruby Riott, was one of the individuals that was released earlier this year at the same time as Braun Strowman and Samoa Joe in that whole group. Yeah, she was a part of that group. And in my opinion, Ruby Riott was the MVP of women's wrestling back in 2018, 2019, when Ronda started to go on her path of rage and tear through the women's division. There was a lot of those matches with Ruby that helped her get into the groove, and Ruby could have been slotted in as a top women's champion or challenger at any point in time back then. She was nerfed since. She was injured. She had surgery done on both of her shoulders. Came back, and her and Liv Morgan never really got back to a true point where she never really got back into a true main event type of spot. But her and Liv Morgan as a tag team definitely should have been champions at some point in time. That's just another act that WWE had completely missed on, because they could have been champions and they would have been excellent champions. I wanted them to be in the women's Dusty Classic as well. That would have been a great opportunity for them to showcase some excellent women's tag team wrestling. But as things continue to go, they just didn't do anything with them, and we saw how that played out. Ruby's been pretty low key since being released, so I'm glad pictures that popped up of her with red hair's no longer green. I've always loved her look because she stands out so much more than majority of the white women in professional wrestling, and I think that that's excellent for her. She would be an amazing signing for AEW and someone who can really help that women's division. AEW has a good women's division. They just don't get time. This one match a week on Dynamite, that's not it, Chief. It'll never be it. Giving them one match a week is just not a good look, and they need to do something about that. Ruby Soho is someone that, if booked correctly, they can help. And speaking of booking, Malachi Black squashing Cody, it was what was needed. They built that right. Malachi coming out of that looking super over. Cody tried to retire at the end of it. I don't know if that was a real retirement or not, but Black finishes him off, almost puts him out of his misery. I'm here for that. I am over Cody in every sense of the word. This is a good introductory feud for Malachi. It helps him look strong for whatever may be next for him. I am 110% behind how that went down. Then let's talk about AEW All Out, which is scheduled for that first weekend in September. I want to go. I have tickets. I have my lodging squared away. I am planning on getting my flights this month, but man, things are looking bad with COVID-19, and I am wondering if I should go or not. I'm on the fence, but it's going to be a hell of a show, and it's going to be something to see, especially with the news that Adam Page is no longer the opponent for Kenny Omega. So I'm wondering, they're going to do Christian Cage there, so that doesn't overshadow, or that doesn't get overshadowed by CM Punk's debut, which is probably what's going to go down. I'm looking forward to that night, and I had floor seats. Man, I got floor seats. So let's see what happens if I end up going or not. So I wanted to take a brief moment to talk about this hot topic that I've been seeing a lot of on wrestling Twitter about the diversity and inclusion in AEW's roster. So it's important that we say diversity and inclusion, because you can have a lot of people of color in a place of employment in a business, but they can not necessarily be included in the work, included in the direction of the company. Their voices are not heard. They are not seen. They are not elevated. That's kind of the talking point of what's going on with AEW right now. They have a lot of black and brown people on their roster, but none of them are being elevated in any way, shape, or form. LAX has been stuck in, they've been featured a lot, but they've been in like middling situations, losing more than they should. Sammy Guevara's been getting some shine. Andrade's there to see what he does over time. The Lucha Brothers, same thing as LAX. Over on the women's side, Red Velvet, she had a pretty good run for a while. She's now in the title picture, which I think is great. Jade Cargill has some stroke as well. Big Swole is there. Thunder Rosa as well. But a lot of those women you see on Dark and Elevation. Same thing with the singles male wrestlers, Dark and Elevation. You never really see any of them on Dynamite, and that's really where the questions are popping up. You see a lot of the elite on Dynamite, which I get, but where are the other people? Where are the people who look like me? Where are the people who look like Latinos in the main event picture? And I think that's what people want to see more of. We can use their partnership with Impact as an example, where you don't see any other women crossing over. How are they going to be included in this? What does that look like for them? I get what individuals are saying about AEW, about their main event picture. I get it. I understand. It is heavily white and male, as professional wrestling is. It's different than WWE. Doesn't mean it's worse than WWE. It's different because WWE has their own problems. Would I like to see someone like a Scorpio Sky get elevated? Yeah, I mean, he lost twice for the TNT Championship, and he left one tag team, had 2 shots at the TNT title, lost both of them, and got put right back in the tag team, and now he's not on television anymore. I think he's on Dark and Elevation, but I haven't really seen too much of that. Those are the types of questions and types of comments that a lot of people are making. Like, why should I watch AEW when I don't see enough people who look like me? I, for one, get that. I don't fully agree, but I get it. And I don't know if this will ever change over there. I think it will at some point in time. I hope that it will, because, they really promoted themselves as a company that believes in diversity from the jump as they started getting going, but we haven't seen it yet. So I'm still giving them a little bit of a benefit of a doubt. The size of a mustard seed, to see what happens and to see what they look like in the future. But it is something that needs to be addressed, because when I want to see people of color, people who look like me, wrestling and succeeding in wrestling, I watch WWE. I watch Bobby Lashley, Kofi Kingston, Xavier Woods, Big E, Bianca, Sasha, the Street Profits, Hit Row, Legado del Fantasma. I watch them because they look and they represent something that I can relate to. And that actually kind of brings me to the final thing I want to say about the future of this show. As I said, I've fallen off a little bit with getting the show up. I've been under the weather. But I've been having some thoughts about the future of this show, and Let's Talk Wrestling isn't going anywhere. It may switch platforms. I may do things a little bit differently, but I'm seeing more and more white voices in the podcasting space talking about topics that I'm passionate about. And I don't see enough of people who look like me. I don't see enough black men and women talking about wrestling and doing shows about wrestling. There are some there. They have Deadass Girls podcast, the Wrestling Girls podcast. I can't remember what their name is, but there's a lot of people out there who are doing work in this space, but we don't get the platforms and opportunities that I see going to a lot of white males and some white women as well. So I'm going to keep chipping away, keep chipping away at this show. I plan on being back next week, and like I said, I'm going to continue to do the best I can to be weekly content for everyone who listens. But there's a space here where my voice needs to be, and where more voices for people who look like me need to be, and I want to fulfill that. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and close out. I thank you everyone for listening to this episode. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. As always, you can find this content over at MMAratings.net and MMA Ratings on Instagram and Twitter. MMA Ratings.net on Instagram and Twitter, MMA Ratings on YouTube, and also on Anchor, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, and Spotify. Myself, get me up at _sports. And everyone have a safe weekend, and I will see you back here next week.